do you have to have a reason for everything, or?
No, but if you're gonna do like a Japanese, if it's gonna look a little Japanese, you gotta do it enough right.
Right. You don't want.
I don't have a good. I'm so bad at putting my thoughts into describing them. Because I guess I only speak with analogies to connect with the average person. That's more important to me. Yeah. I use a lot of analogies that get to people.
Are you talking about talking with the clients or other guys at the shops?
I guess now I'm switching to talking about the client because they'll come in with nothing on their arm. They want a big tattoo, but they show you something and you don't want to disrespect their idea, but you kind of want to let them know like you're going to outgrow that. And I always use the Hampton Beach t-shirt.
Okay.
You don't want to look like you got a Hampton Beach t-shirt on. and you get them pumped up and you kind of put down what you like, move their hand. You want this, but also show them what it looks like.
Sure. Yeah. You can't just shoot it down and then make believe what I'm talking about or try to imagine something better. You can't really do that.
I don't look at other tattoo stuff that's like, I look at tattoos, but I look at the people who do them right and have been doing them right. Because for the first portion of my career, everything was too light.
Okay.
Everything.
Light and tone.
Yeah. The lines, everything. One, I felt bad, like, getting someone, And then, like, everything just didn't heal right. So you'd see some older tattooers start to abandon all the tricks that they were putting into their tattoos and strip them out. And then it was for a reason. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at some of my old work and I started seeing all these tricks and stuff that I didn't know I could do and that I don't do anymore because it's just a lot of work. And eventually when you see it 10 years later, it's not there.
And for me, I've only been really tattooing strong for the last 10. Not strong for 10, but focused. First few years were nothing.
Yeah, you're fishing around.
And then strong for maybe the last 5, where that's probably even smaller number. But I try to draw the tattoo more dynamic so I can tattoo it a little flatter. But I get carried away.
Yeah.
And I want to render things. And I get bored of the line and fill. And then I get away from that. And then I go back to being more dynamic.
Right. Yeah, but I think you can have like a dynamic composition.
Totally.
And maybe not do so many little tricks and like all these little delicate types of shading because, I mean, like we said earlier, it's just going to fade away. But I think there's something to be said about dynamic design because, I mean, just about 10 years ago, everybody was stripping things down to the max, and it almost became like everybody doing the same thing again. But there was like stripping almost the personality out of tattoos as well.
Yeah, getting them down to. For me, I'll go on YouTube and I'll look at chefs that have been doing it for decades and decades, and want to hear them speak about what they believe in. Stripping everything they do down so you get the most with the least.
Yeah.
So I struggle with that because I want to start off like that, and then I start getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And then I would do a big tattoo on somebody and it's not readable from a distance. And it'd be like, oh, that's the equivalent.
Yeah.
The most with the least. And trying to find a way to make every line matter.
Yeah, you don't need a lot of lines either, because I would find myself doing that with some designs where you just like, contour lines for everything, and then too many lines for detailing, and then when you look at it, it's almost too heavy to look at because of all the different lines.
Yeah, and also like some designs are suited for just lines. And I try to do tattoos now where I'm going to put the lines in, but I'm going to keep reinforcing it with my black intentionally. but not making my lines thicker, but bringing the black to those lines and in the right spot. But my biggest thing is probably if it is a sleeve and I trace the whole arm out, I visualize a grid, maybe like squares, and every part of the arm has to have something entertaining in that spot.
Right.
You can't go a large section with there's really nothing. So I visualize that the person's arms down and someone's looking at them from the back. They're going to see something cool. So the design has to be drawn so that something is cool in every aspect.
Right.
You kind of like getting it out to the edges.
So no real dead space or anything like that.
Yeah, and just drawing towards that composition first, drawing thumbnails, drawing 4 or 5 of them. And blowing those up.
Right.
And working on that. But because my brain wants to put bigger shapes in it.
Sure.
Yeah.
What I've been finding out lately is I've been kind of going back to the things I did in the beginning, like with a lot of the like color studies and tonal studies for tattoos. And that I found by doing that, I'm able to put in less. But kind of like what we were talking about, adding too many tricks or too many little details that don't really read from a distance, you're able to catch those ahead of time. I don't know, it's something that's always kind of been there, but lately when my attention's been on something where like, okay, how can I make it stronger looking or resolving color harmonies? Because I've gotten in those areas where after the tattoo's done, I'm like, if I just did a little color pencil sketch on that, this could have been so much cooler, even though it's, it was good the way it was, but it could have just been taken that extra step further.
When I tattoo something like many times, you get that insight from what you would have done for a render. Sure. And sometimes I'll spend too much time doing it, and then I can't look at it anymore. Right. Because there isn't any fun left in it. But by filling in my drawings ahead of time, you can take more of the lines out. Why would that line be there? Well, it makes more sense if I colored in first. But lately my problem has been spending too much time drawing. Okay. And do you feel like you're getting kind of bogged down by like the different possibilities that could happen, or is it just almost putting the things together so it's mathematically right, whether it be a snake or a dragon. Right. Spend too much time. I draw it and I line it out and eventually fill it in, and it does nothing for me. I did it, but I spent too much time on it, so it doesn't feel like when you first come up with the idea and you love it. It's lost the energy. Yeah, it gets sterile. Yeah. But putting all the work in ahead of time to figure out how to do that on the fly more, that's why it's most important. Right. Yeah, I mean, I go back and forth with trying to get something as perfect as it can, and then the balance with that energy and having it look like a sketch or a drawing. I haven't found any balance there where I'm happy with, because I'll look at something, I'll be like, I can push it a little bit further, and sure, some life gets taken out of it, but I don't know if it's just my idea that the life is taken out of it, or I'm just tired of drawing it, or like I'm tired of just chasing my own tail. That's how I feel. Most of the stuff that I tattoo, like I like it, I don't love it. And I try to feel like the work that I do is like watching a puppy grow, where the first less than a year it gets so big so fast, and then eventually it stops. But I feel like there's no growth in the moment, but if I look back in a year, I'm happy. Sure. I'm happy the distance I made, but I get bored of doing the same thing over and over and over. So I'll take things in a different direction and apply everything I know. But if I get asked to do the same tattoo 5 times, they're all going to look different. Sure. Yeah. And that's the thing I get the most upset about sometimes, is feeling that there isn't any consistency. But if I look back from the first to fifth, they're all different in a good way. There's the growth is different. And I guess that's the only thing that matters to me.
Mm-hmm. Is the personal growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can see just from looking at your work, all the roses that you've done, each rose is slightly different. You might have something a little more traditional, a little bit more realistic, and all these different things. And I see that with all the tattoos you do, where there's a variety in what you're doing. I don't know if it's intentional or it just suits that person to do it that way.
Mainly it feels like that. I always feel like I don't have a method for the way that I draw the things I draw most. I might draw something right off the bat, or spend 3 hours getting it to the point where I drew it in 10 after 3 hours was spent. But those are almost like personal tests of mine. There's only so much you can do. And one to the other, for me, it should look like I did something different.
Yeah.
No one can judge like what's better about it, but
that's for your own sanity.
I'll try something different.
Yeah. I think that's healthy, and got me thinking about kind of what you were already saying about trying to change it up and have something that looks consistent with your body of work. But in a way, like thinking about it now, it could almost be a detriment to make your work look like your work in a way.
Yeah,
like,
I don't know what that is.
Yeah. I don't think it's a bad thing not to know. I don't know what my work looks like, but people say I have my style, and the same thing goes for you. It's like, I don't think you can see it by yourself, but maybe there's something about it that translates over to being like Kyle Harrison tattoo.
For the most part, like if I can see a style, I have all my line drawings taped up, and I'll try to like analyze the trends. What am I doing all the time subconsciously that I don't know? And then I can reflect on it and look at 15 drawings and see how I tried to steer things to be a little bit more sharp. Ends being sharper, adding that. So usually there are things like patterns, whether it's a bird's wing, or there's usually lots of patterns in whatever I'm doing. Repetition and making things sharp, and kind of seeing like what type of psychology I use to just draw something that I'd done 10 times, and what worked, what did I like, what did I hate, and I'll just try to not put the stuff in that was really easy for me. Okay. That kind of, for me, kind of is the boring part.
Say you have a snake and you have the S bend. What you're saying is not going for that easy S bend, but just because you can do it and it's easy, but trying to put an extra curl or maybe a strange angle in there just to make it more difficult for yourself.
Yeah. Whatever shape the S bend would take up, there has to be other shapes in there that are more dynamic, more fun.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is just drawing that broad shape and then drawing within that. But snake's perfect. The perfect thing to check your work, to know where your flaws are and like kind of what you're trying to not spend a lot of time on that you should be.
Yeah.
Seeing through the design. And that's probably like just like the perfect check your work tattoo. Doing the belly scales the same way. For me, that I'll have to find a new way. After I feel a couple successful tattoos, I'll just get away from it.
So for you, it's like a learning process in a way. It's not just I'm a tattooer and I'm tried and true designs. You're trying to push yourself and make designs that a little risky, but trying to make those a newer tried and true design for yourself.
Yeah, it would be everything that I like goes in my tattoos. All the tattooers that I see, the things that they do that I like, it's the stuff that gets a little bit more intricate.
All the little subtleties.
Yeah, that's definitely what I think about the most when I draw a tattoo. Drawing it like how some people might look at a design and focus on all the fancy parts to it, but not know how someone got there. I want to see how they got there. And for me, like everything that I think that I'm trying to work on, I've already felt that feeling in some other part of my life. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like that learning process for me. I've already felt this way about something before. Like what was it that got me through it?
For like previous designs
yeah, figuring out how to draw something the fifth time and still make it interesting, but shows that I'm learning and advancing on all the things I've already done.
Right, of course. Yeah, I've been doing that with the dragons, just trying to redraw dragons and constantly changing those. I look back at some of the dragons I did a couple years ago, and I'm like, ew. I don't want to see them.
But it was the best of your ability at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can't get that discouraged when I feel like that. I feel like it was the best I could do, and that's fine.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I looked at them, I was stoked about them at the time.
Yeah.
And then looking back, I'm like, oh, man. But in a way, it's like, what do? You either get depressed about it or you get happy at where you've gone, and in a couple years from now, I'm going to be thinking the same thing.
That's how I try to feel. I'd rather feel like that and be sad when it's happened, you know, because you don't know. Mm-hmm. I didn't know how bad that sucked. But I get caught up with thinking the people who do it well and best, mm-hmm. if they were to look at my tattoos, they would say, the right amount of stuff is in there. Mm-hmm. The rest is kind of on you style-wise, what you like. But consistencies of things, placements, does the claw match the size of that claw?
Sure. Throughout?
If that claw is a little bigger than this one, then why? Why didn't I slow down and have more patience? And for me, that's all of it.
Yeah.
Finding more patience. Because I speed up too quickly. I run out of patience. I get bored of looking at something. So I don't do marathon tattoo sessions. I do 3.5 hours max, maybe 4. But typically people are done and I'm ready to move on.
That's a decent time. I find myself wanting to do that more often. People will ask a lot of times for all-day sessions, and I only do that for the first session just because I like to do a lot of drawing on and placement, and I don't like feeling the pressure like somebody's waiting for me. So I'll do that and maybe eat the cost of the day for that, just so I know for the next session I'm going to be in a good place where I can just sit down and start tattooing right away. But you were talking earlier about speeding up and stuff, and I've been going back and forth of being like, saying to myself, hey, you should be done by now. Why is it taking so long? And I'd find myself trying to rush and speed up, but it ends up taking me much more time with that mindset. And I just did like 2 outlines for paintings over the weekend. I didn't rush. I just took my time and had fun, and I got way more done than I would have. Do you have any experience with that kind of mental game of thinking you should be doing something different?
Yeah, I can't find really any joy in the moment because I'm kind of getting to the next spot. Doing the tattoos like in like chapters where I'm only going to want to start that one if I know I finish it that day. Mm-hmm. Draw the tattoo, make sure that it fits the body the way that it's supposed to, and all the little gestures that I put in my drawing on a flat piece of paper still look the way on the skin.
Okay.
Now, I used to probably cruise right by that. Maybe it would be the difference in somebody moving, flipping them over, having their body be in the right position to do those lines perfectly, instead of like struggling underneath someone to just get them in.
Sure.
So that was a big part, realizing that why was I doing that? Why would I just try to zip those lines in? And for me, if they're crooked or, you know, they have wiggles in them, that probably gets to me the most.
We're just kind of being lazy at the moment.
Yeah. Why? You know, usually the person never knows. They never know. But for me, I can't look at the tattoo and know that I just chucked lines in the skin. But sometimes that's just in the like how I was doing it when I did have patience,
right,
and I was focusing. But I flip-flop, getting really meticulous on certain tattoos, or I have to learn to know that a sleeve isn't really about all the lines being perfect. And I'm just getting away from that more now, but pretty much nitpicking.
Yeah. Do you think you taking on a lot more bigger work lately and having kind of less time, do you think you're making those changes because of the growth in work coming your way?
Yeah, breaking the work up and learning how to do work large is definitely a big thing that I wasn't doing all the time. Drawing a whole sleeve up front, but knowing how much is realistically going to go down the first day. And more drawing my work like that, but spending more time on the bigger tattoos and drawing them quicker and using that time and budgeting myself. But I'll only draw tattoos a couple days in advance.
Okay.
So if I have something on Friday, I'm drawing it Wednesday. And then I'll probably be finishing a tattoo drawing in the morning. But like if I tattoo at 3, I've spent the night and the morning working on it, typically. I'll just do a lot of drawing in the morning at home. I almost draw everything in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm the type of person where if I'm sitting and drawing something at 10 and I'm tired, I stop.
Yeah.
Because I'll draw for 20 minutes in the morning and do 10 times the amount when I'm tired at night.
Typically what I do is I'll sketch out the general idea or composition the night before, but I won't have the brain power to finish it. I'll find myself like correcting a line 10 times when the next day I could just... But yeah, I like to go to sleep on it and then at least have to think about it the day before, and then the next day I'll have something to almost correct. Almost like if someone brought you a shitty design and they're like, can you clean this up and make a tattoo out of it? I'll think of my first drawing as a shitty design that someone brought me, and then without any sort of emotional attachment to it, I just like, okay, this is garbage, I'm going to make it better, and go from there.
The part where the design starts to be exciting is really where I need to get to. And it's all in the early compositional phase where I'm probably drawing every large tattoo is a tracing that I photograph, and I go into my iPad and I start it compositionally with the big marker. No, like the bigger tools.
Yeah.
Draw shapes, draw silhouettes, draw what it's going to look like filled in. And if those shapes and silhouettes are strong looking, and then I'll start to draw the details into them.
Right.
Where if I do a half sleeve of roses, I'll just lay some circles out where I want them, and then I'll just start going into that, but that first.
Yeah.
And then I'll get it to a certain point and just print it out, and I have to check it with my hand. I'll have to print it out to size, and I'll do my line sheets by hand.
Yeah, to make sure the proportions are right.
And I can, the line feels right to tattoo it. In an iPad, you can do whatever you want, but I don't really print anything out of the iPad anymore and just tattoo it.
Right.
I don't draw tattoos with a single point line. I draw them all with shapes.
Okay.
And colors and blocking everything in like how I want. So if I draw a dragon, it's a line and then the arms, and then I'll start getting into colors, and I'll just break things up through colors, shapes, and then I'll line it out.
So making sure that it has a very strong silhouette, and I mean that really helps from seeing things at a distance as well, where if it can read at these simple abstract shape and you know what it is, then just adding lines to it can only help.
The lines go where they want to go when it looks right. But it's kind of, you build a house slowly by foundation, then framing it, and eventually you get to the details.
Yeah.
But if you get so caught up on the early parts of the details so early, you don't know how how you got to them. That was my biggest problem for the longest time. I liked all the features and the tricks, and that's why I was drawing that tattoo, but not knowing how a lot of the lines look a certain way because they are painted by brush.
Yeah. And that's a big trait for like oil painters.
Yeah.
They start with the big structure for the most part, and then they gradually break it down and subdivide each form into different planes or
everything has its place.
Yeah.
That's more satisfying to me than anything else. I use the tattoo traditions of lines and stuff, but I draw more like an illustrator now.
Right.
Because if someone asked me if that was the best of my ability, I'd probably say no. The design would have more time in it. It would look totally different. Mm-hmm. And that's what I go back and forth with. I would have spent more time on it.
Yeah, it's funny. I go on like little searches online, and I come across some illustrators as well. And I get a lot of inspiration from matte painters. Mm-hmm. And it's really fascinating the way that they work. And there was this one artist, he was like a creature designer. I'm never good at remembering people's names. But it was fascinating because he was able to get something out super fast. It was all digital. And he just made like a silhouette and then started just breaking down the form. I've done that as well. And I had some success, but for some reason I just went back to my same ways. I'll show you some drawings later that were done like that.
Where you started with shapes first.
Yeah, like I painted because, sometimes I'll paint that and then take the line drawings off of the shapes. I
mean, I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube that answer the questions in my head. Mm-hmm. And it has nothing to do with tattooing.
No.
It's painters, illustrators. A lot of times it's people talking about, making food and translating those thoughts that are the same. Mm-hmm. They're the same thoughts. They start off with the same stuff every time, mm-hmm. but they make it different, and they can change it all whatever way they want.
Yeah.
So for me, it's usually, number one, how do I make it different from the last, but have the stuff I liked from the last also in it. Mm-hmm. It's looking at illustrators and how they lay stuff out.
So it's almost like you're just shedding the skin of the bad habits and letting all the good stuff come to the next round.
Every single thing probably is totally applied to the next one.
Yeah.
And it feels like that, where I do a tattoo and I can look at it and I get so critical on aspects that I love, but then I hate a lot of spots way more.
Right.
And they just kind of make it to the next round. I'll do this with that next time.
Yeah.
And the test is a rose. There's only so much you can put into it. Mm-hmm. I go through phases, put too much into it, and then I put too little into it, and I kind of bounce around and kind of settle to where I'm happy. Mm-hmm. But drawing it differently kind of every time is probably the thing I like the most, and the thing that I am the most upset about that I do to myself.
Yeah, you never find like a comfortable spot.
Yeah, no.
But there is something to be said about that. It's like maybe not changing things every single time, but giving yourself a time to grow and then branch out.
The tattoos kind of line themselves up like that too. If it's a rose, it's going to be different for a guy and a girl. I'm just going to draw it differently. Yeah. Maybe there's more black into it, or maybe there's almost none. And the toughest thing that I definitely struggle with is getting a decent reaction that I'd like when you put something on Instagram. Mm. You can tell when somebody loves something. When people do, it's undeniable that people just like something more.
Sure.
But usually it's stuff that I probably wasn't going to post. Mm-hmm. And that's the toughest.
Yeah. Well, people like the things they're more familiar with.
Yeah.
It always takes a while for anything new to catch on. I think that's always been the case.
Yeah, totally.
People who revolutionizing one thing or another, they'll not going to be accepted right away, and then it becomes a norm.
I think that when I do something that I really like, I felt like I would like it before I did it. Mm. I knew going into a tattoo or a painting or whatever it is that I was gonna like it, and I was gonna be excited for it. And finding more of that is pretty much, I guess, what I'm trying to do the most of.
Right.
And whatever went into that, kind of doing more of my own plan for the result in the end is definitely better. But I usually stick pretty close to what the person does want. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it does mean sacrificing a lot more of what I really wanted to do, just so that they don't feel like I just did whatever I wanted. And that's definitely a big one, where I stick too close to their idea, which is usually they have no investment in it, and it's on the first page of Google, but I can tell now.
I was talking with Johannes last week, and I told him that you were going to be on the podcast, and he was like, man, Kyle, he's able to turn every bad idea into the most amazing and beautiful tattoo. And I think is really true for your work. When I've looked at things and I'm like, I wouldn't want to do that, but no. He made it into something that I want to do, you know?
And that is probably the biggest test for me. Finding a way that it is enjoyable, pocket watches, all that. Yeah. You can't find reference that's good. And then I don't want to spend too much time drawing it. I'd rather just make sure the circles look right and then just start doing it. But that's definitely a problem of doing tattoos that I shouldn't do. And I realize it when I start it.
Yeah, you get to do more of those.
Yeah. and they'll attract more of that work. Mm-hmm. Which I don't want.
I'd love to talk more, but we only keep this about a half an hour. So.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah. Even better.
But let's talk after and nerd out. But where can we find you? What state? What shop?
New Hampshire, Dover, New Hampshire, Seacoast, New Hampshire. Hidden History Tattoo. I've been there for 7 years now. I'm from the area, so I won't be going far.
Right.
My clientele's been there the whole time, and it's just now maturing to what I want.
Right.
So I'm just now able to get to tattoos that I'm most happy with.
That's good.
Size, style.
Mm-hmm. I can't wait to see. And your Instagram and maybe a shop Instagram.
Yep. Kyle Harrison Tattoo at Hidden History Tattoo.
Awesome.
That's it.
You're the man.
I don't have a website. I don't use any of that.
You don't need it.
Yeah.
You have an Instagram. Thanks so much for driving down here.
Yeah, thank
you.
you.
Appreciate it. It's late. You've been in the back of my head for a while since I started doing the podcast, and finally,
I'm excited.
Got you.
Definitely excited. Nervous.
You did great. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Let me have a hug.